thanks everyone for joining. Really pleased to be here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about implementing an Incentivised Partners program in Mautic, which is an open source project. So a little bit about me in case we haven't met. My name is Ruth Cheesley and my pronouns are she, her. I've been using open source and contributing for quite a long time. I'm based in Ipswich in the UK, and currently I work full-time for Acquia as Mautic project lead, so I spend most of the time working in the open source project. I'm also going to upload my slides to my notice page, along with lots of links and references and useful things that you might want to explore after this session. So don't worry about like frantically writing down URLs and stuff like that. It should all be available, and I'll try and tweet it out after the session as well. So here's what we're going to cover. I'm going to start off by talking a bit about the things that we had to put in place in our open source project in order for us to put together a partners program. And first off, we're going to talk a little bit about contributions and how we determine what a contribution is in open source and how do we track them over time to see who is contributing where and which organizations are contributing or not contributing. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the financial side of things. So how do we make it fair for partners around the world, wherever they are based, to become a partner financially, make it reasonable based on their geographic location. And also, what do we actually do with the program? Like, what's the value to the company? What's the value to the community? How has it worked? And a few lessons we've learned or things that I'm thinking we could have done differently or I might want to change. So yeah, if there are any questions, then do feel free to just stop me, Ruth, as well. That's bizarre having Ruth and Ruth, isn't it? How often does that happen? But yeah, do feel free to just jump in if there's anything in the chat. So a little bit of history, if you've never come across Mautic, we're a relatively new open source project comparatively in the open source world. We were founded in 2015, and you can find our open source community on mautic.org, and we're on GitHub as Mautic/Mautic. And at the same time, when the open source project was formed, the founder also created a company that provided it in a software as a service model, mainly aimed at the kind of enterprise end of the spectrum. And that company was acquired by Acquia in 2019, which is how I come to work for Acquia, which they have rolled that software as a service product into their marketing cloud and digital experience platform. So at that point, the community was basically reliant on Mautic Inc.'s engineers. They would do the releases and they did a lot of the project roadmap and everything like that, basically aligned with the corporate roadmap. But in 2019, this is when the community now started to have its own governance and to operate as a self-sufficient open source project, running our own releases, having our own roadmaps that are closely aligned with the corporate roadmaps of Acquia and other companies in the business. But we really started to become our own open source project. So it's only been a few years, so we're relatively new. But we wanted to create a partners program probably about 1.5 years ago. This started to come up in discussions within the community. And there were several reasons why we wanted to do this. We wanted to encourage both the financial contributions from people to Mautic as a project to help us with our finances, but we also really needed people to contribute practically in some of the ways that DB was just talking about, like not only in the code, but also in marketing, in documentation, answering questions on the forums, fixing typos in the readmes, or any way possible, because we desperately were short of contributors at that point. We also wanted to try to help people in the community who needed help with Mautic to find the people who are actually actively supporting our community and work with them, because those people were helping to make the community better and they were giving back. So we wanted to really encourage people to work with those people rather than people who were just sort of doing freelancing but not actually contributing back to the community. And we wanted to be able to promote those people who were making a big difference, who were making sure that they were giving back to our open source project. and give them something to be proud of. So we wanted to have a way for them to demonstrate pride in their financial and practical contributions to this open source project, and use that as a way of kind of pitching to other businesses, look, we are, you know, one of the partners for the community, and we are actually giving back and helping build this community and make things better. So I'll start with contributions, and this ties in quite nicely with what we were just talking about being able to contribute in any way and having that recognized. So we needed to figure out what we actually consider as a contribution. And I actually came to open source through a non-traditional route. I don't come from a development background, and now I lead a project, but I was really keen that we made sure that there were routes into our open source project for anyone, whatever their skills, whatever their way that they want to contribute. So this was like really important for me and for our project as well. So to do that, we needed to figure out where do those contributions actually happen, because it's not all in one place. There's lots of different places that these contributions happen. How do we also track things that aren't trackable, so to speak? So people running meetings or folks who are organizing a conference or things like that that aren't like a pull request was made and this person made it. So we needed a way to be able to ad hoc apply contributions to people. And we also needed a way to be able to associate our contributions with organizations, because it's generally speaking organizations who are becoming the partners in the partners program. So I did lots of research on this, and there are open source tools out there that can help with this. The one that we settled on is called Savannah CRM, which is like a CRM that you would use in a business, but it's purely focused on community, and it's really focused around contributions. And this is freely available on GitHub, but you can also have a hosted version, which is what we use because we just don't have the resources in our community to manage it on our own infrastructure. So if anyone's a sysadmin, we could really do with some server management people in our community as well. But basically this allows us to bring together all of the different channels where we track contributions into one centralized dashboard, which we look at to see what's happening in the community and get an overview of what's happening. It lets us say what we consider as contributions and track it over time and figure out individuals' connections to organizations, so we can get a rolled up view of what an organization is doing over time. So it ticked a lot of boxes for us in our community. And I mentioned that I wanted to make sure we were tracking not only just code, but anywhere that someone was basically helping to contribute to helping people be successful with Mautic. That was our definition really, or my definition really of contribution. So we start with GitHub with pull requests being open, but we also have a support forum. So people who reply, and that reply is marked as a solution by the person who created the post, that is considered to be a contribution. Giving help to people in Slack. So when someone says thank you, or there's some kind of feedback or what have you, that is suggested as a contribution, and we can review those and say, yeah, it was a contribution, or no, it was just someone being sarcastic and saying, oh, thanks. They weren't actually thanking someone for their help. We also look at meetup.com. So people who host meetups in our community, those hosters are considered to be making a contribution for every meetup that they make. We also track people who attend meetups as well. And things that happen outside of our property. So people giving help on Reddit, people giving answers on Stack Exchange, which are accepted answers to questions about Mautic. We also have some community podcasts. If these are purely altruistic, so they're not sales pitches or whatever, they're just for the purpose of encouraging people to use Mautic or telling them what's happening in the community, then we consider the people who create those to be making a contribution as well. And also people who write on our blog, so the authors for the blogs at Mautic.org. But not everything fits in nicely into those buckets. You know, I mentioned that sometimes there are things that we can't necessarily track. So we also have the ability, our team leads in our community have the ability to manually assign contributions for anything outside those channels. So if someone attends a team meeting, they deliver a project that they're working on, they lead a sprint, they speak at a conference about Mautic, They help with proofreading or correcting an article. All of those things we consider to be contributions as well. And we're looking into adding other things. So we use Jira for managing projects across the community. So for example, if someone is assigned a Jira issue to create a social media header for our Facebook page, when that is marked as closed, then the person that's assigned to would also get contribution credit. So it's not perfect, but we do have lots of ways to sort of keep track of what people are doing across the community. So we use this information to create reports. So we create reports every month on individual contributors and on companies. I love how you're tracking. Is this tracked in your tool? It's tracked in Savannah CRM. So our tool is a marketing automation tool, so it doesn't do this kind of tracking. But I can talk a bit more about Mautic outside of this. So in the individual contributions side of things, every month we look at reports which tell us about the top contributors, the most active people in our community. We also look at top contributing organizations and the most active organizations. We also look at how many new contributors we have and a couple of other things which I'll mention in a sec. So we use that information to do a monthly shout out in Slack. And I post this in our announcements channel and mention the people or the organizations that are contributing, how many contributions they've made or how active they have been, and whether it's an increase or decrease from the last month. And sometimes we do have like quirky months. For example, immediately after the festive season, we knew that it was going to be a bit reduced. So if there is a sort of discrepancy in the data, I usually call it out and just say it's probably going to be a bit lower because of this or a bit higher because of this. And people in our community can also always go and look at the last 90 days on a public report that we share. So they can always go and see what's happening in the community and who the most active contributors are and so forth. And yeah, we give them a link that explains what contributions are, you know, how we consider things to be contributions and how to get on this list. We do this as well. That was for organizations. And then this is what it looks like for individual contributors. So we're mentioning them by name. If they're in Slack, it will be an @ mention, and if they're not, it's just a mention. That might be someone who's, for example, on the forums or on GitHub on Slack, and how many contributions they've made or how active they've been. And at the bottom, you'll see the number of new contributors that we've had and the number of new members who are actually joining the community. So it gives a bit of a pulse check of how things are going in our community. And because we started doing the tracking for the partners program, it enabled us to do this kind of thing, to actually recognize people, even if they're not partners, and recognize all contributions. In fact, Joey Keller, who's the #1 on our active members list there, he predominantly does forum. He's mostly in the forums, and he's part of a company, and that's pretty much how they get their partner status, is because of his activity helping people in the forums. So the next step is finances, and finances in the open source projects can be quite tricky and quite thorny. So we had to figure out how to accept financial contributions. After the acquisition, the only thing we had in terms of finances was whatever Acquia gave us. And I had to make a business case for every expenditure, basically. And it went off into this black hole that is like a large corporate finance department, and came back saying yes or no. And that wasn't going to be good enough really for the community. We needed to have a way for it to be open and transparent, for everybody to see the money coming in and the money going out and how we were dealing with that, and to see who was contributing and so on and so forth. We also had to figure out, well, how much is enough for someone to be eligible to be a partner, and how long do we want them to be contributing in that way? And how can we make that amount equitable worldwide? Because $100 in America is a very, very different ask to $100 in Romania or Kenya or New Zealand or Switzerland or whatever. So I wanted to find a way that would make it fair as we can, wherever you are in the world, wherever your head office is based. So when accepting donations in open source, financial transparency is absolutely key. And there have been scandals with open source projects, with money being spent in ways it shouldn't have been spent. So from my perspective, it was really important that there was absolute full transparency. And for this, we went with Open Collective. We're hosted by the Open Source Collective, who specifically exists to support open source projects. And they basically act as our bank, but we have an absolutely public ledger. You can see all the money going in and all the money going out, all of our accounts for the whole collective, but also you can drill into a specific project where we can ring fence money just for a particular project or a particular event, for example, and you can see all of the funds going in and out for that purpose. There's a question, how are you sending money internationally? We've faced issues with this. With Open Collective, you can send money through TransferWise, whatever it's called now, Wise maybe, and possibly PayPal. We do have some issues with sending people in Nigeria. They have to have a Payoneer account and we pay into their Payoneer account, which then pays out to them. And there are some countries you just can't send money to because of the trading rules with the US, I think. But if you have a look at the links that I'll share on my notice page, you can have a look at the financial policy where it outlines all of those rules with links off to the places that you can't send money. Hopefully that answers your question, DB, but it is a challenge. And the reason why we went with Open Collective as well is because I'm located in the UK. We've got people on our team in the US, in Europe, in Africa, and you can imagine trying to get a bank account and having signatories in all those countries. It's just not going to happen. So Open Source Collective were amazingly supportive and still are. We also have GitHub sponsors. We applied to GitHub sponsors. It opened up probably, I think it was just before we started this process, so that people can support us either on Open Collective, they can sponsor us on a one-off or monthly basis, or they can support us on GitHub sponsors, which gives the icon on their profile. So a lot of companies prefer to sponsor us on GitHub sponsors for that reason. But the money from GitHub sponsors just automatically comes into our Open Collective. So it's sort of all tied up nice and neatly together. And this has been really, really helpful for us, making it very easy to be transparent about the money, making it very easy for people to donate on a recurring basis and hassle-free for us. You know, they just do the process and it goes through and it all works, which is amazing. So the next challenge, now we can take money and we can spend money, because we also have virtual credit cards with the Open Collective, is how do we make it equitable? Wherever people are in the world, how do we say this is the minimum amount you need to spend to be supporting in order to be considered a partner? So in a lot of my contribution in the past was in the Joomla community. And in the Joomla community, they used a tool called the Big Mac Index, which is a real thing. I'm not just making it up. It's from The Economist. Go have a Google, which allows you to determine relevant costs, cost for a country based on the price of a Big Mac in that country. So it was initially created as a bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing, but it's actually quite a nice tool. It doesn't work everywhere, because if there's hyperinflation happening like the country on the first one on this list, it's going to be way off the scale. So you do have to use a bit of discretion. But it basically says like $100 is our base price in the US. If you're in Switzerland, it's slightly more than $100 because the value of a Big Mac is slightly higher. If you're in other countries, then it's proportionately less based on the price of a Big Mac. So it's fairly simple. It's very easy. I have a spreadsheet. They put the data out on GitHub every month, I think. Or, no, every year they update the data on GitHub. So you can just update your spreadsheets. But it gave us a really nice way of saying, right, okay, here's the minimum amount. And we do it based on the head office location. Or wherever they're located, like their main office base. And we decided that 3 months, so a quarter, was a reasonable amount of time for someone to be consistently contributing both financially and practically to be considered for a partner status. So they have to be able to demonstrate consistency over 3 months. So that's the contributions and the finances. So how does it all kind of come together and how does it work? Some of the things we had to work out were, how do people how do people apply to join the program? What do they get if they are a community partner? What value can we give as a community partner? And how do we incentivize them? How do we encourage people to sign up, but also how do we encourage them to stay a partner? What is it that's of value to them? So we wanted to make this, I wanted to make this as simple and faff-free as possible, because we are very busy. I'm particularly very busy. So we basically made a simple Google form which people could fill in when they feel they meet the mandatory requirements. So we have 3 requirements. I mentioned 2 of them already, at least 3 months contributing. And we look in Savannah CRM to see their contribution history. We make sure we've got all of their staff logged in there and associated with the company. At least 3 months of contributing financially at the minimum level or above for their country of their head office or their primary location. So some people who are in countries where it's actually less than $100 prefer to donate at $100. That's awesome. But they only have to hit the minimum to be eligible. And we added in the ability to check to see if they have any code of conduct breaches against either the organization or the team members who work for the organization over the past 12 months. And we also track that in Savannah. So this has not been an issue for us, but we don't want to have partners in our organization who have code of conduct breaches against them or their team. So that's why this one is included. I'm quite pleased we included that just as a check. And if they are a partner, well, they get a prominent listing on our website, which is very well indexed and very helpful for their own SEO. Each partner has a page in the directory, which includes a backlink to their website. The top 3 partners every month by activity and contributions are featured on the homepage of Mautic.org. So we have a featured partners section that shows the logos of 3 of our partners linking to their partners page. The partners on our partners page ranked by their activity and their contributions in the previous month. So we just shuffle them around each month based on who's contributing more and who's more active. And also we mention them in all of our official conferences. So I mention them in the keynote. They're on a slide in my keynote every year. And we try as much as we can to make sure that people are aware of these organizations. On their pages, they're able to showcase who they are as a company, what their values are, what they do. They can highlight how they actually contribute to the project. So for example, Acquia employs me full-time to manage the community. Someone else might be running our community team or leading our product team or helping out with questions in the forums, for example. We list the active contributors over the last month, and we have a contributions graph that shows how active they've been over the last quarter and how many contributions they've made over the last quarter. So anyone who's looking at these partners pages can see how active they actually are. We allow them to list relevant case studies of how they work with Mautic in their company and successes that they've had, which go into our case studies database. So this is really helpful for the community because we get some really good case studies, but it's also really helpful for them because they're showcasing the benefits of working with them. So some of the wins that they've had for their clients, so it encourages people to work with them. If they have a partners program, they can also promote that on their page and say, if you become a partner with us, then we can help you in really big projects. You can host with us, blah, 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 whatever their partners programs are. And also we have a lead generation form. So if people read that and they like what they see, they can fill in a lead gen form and it will send it directly to their sales team, or we can link out to a lead gen form that they already have on their own web properties, whichever they want. So it's quite a valuable thing for them. And we do get quite a lot of feedback that this is really helpful in terms of business. Another perk that they have, this was not used massively, but it is used sometimes, is that they're allowed to submit 3 feature requests a year as a partner directly to me as project lead without going through our usual process, which is submitting them on our ideas forum, having community discussion and voting and so on and so forth. So that allows them to submit them either funded or unfunded. So they could say, I've got $5,000 to put towards this feature being created, but I haven't got the resources to do it myself. We can get someone in the community to work on that project, for example, or it might be an unfunded project. They just really want this feature to come into Mautic, and we can then decide whether it's something we want to put on the roadmap and how we go about doing that. So this is something that's relatively new, and we have had a couple of features that have come through this way where partners are having these features worked on. And then promoting them as much as we can, as best as we can. So when we have a new partner join, we do a big social media song and dance about it. We do an email blast out to our community, telling people that we've got a new partner that's joined and telling them a bit more about the partner and how to get to know them and meet them. Our partners are featured on every community newsletter with links to their partners page. So at the bottom of every community newsletter, we say thank you to our partners and we provide links to them there. And also we try as best as we can to reshare relevant news and content from those partners into our social media streams where it's appropriate to do so. So we're trying to amplify their messaging and their communications to our network and trying to make sure that people are aware of what they're doing, what services they provide, and how they can help people in the community. So it has been really, really positive. It was a very much a get it up very quickly and get it working kind of affair. We have seen very significant uptake in sponsorship and interest from organizations, particularly after we launched the Partners Program. We had several people who started sponsoring at the level that was needed for their region because they wanted to become a partner. We enrolled 6 partners to start with, and we've got one who's just going through the review process, like getting more contributions in the community before they can become a partner. The great thing from our perspective is we've seen sustained contributions from partners. So they have continued and consistently contributed to Mautic in whatever way matters to them or whatever way they can contribute to the project and whatever way their staff want to contribute. We've also gained new contributors from people who want to be partners, but because we have the requirement for them to be actively contributing, we've had people say, okay, let me start a meetup group in my local area, or okay, I'll help out for an hour on the forums. I'll join your Open Source Friday sprints and help with going through bug reports or testing new features. So it's really helped us sort of drive the awareness of the importance of giving back to our community and our project. It's also enabled people, I'll tell you about the Open Source Friday sprints in a sec. It's also enabled people in the community to build and understand who are the makers in our community, which is one of the things that we really wanted to do, because that is really driving that cycle of like, if you help support those organizations who are supporting your project, they're going to support your projects more and the project will therefore grow. So it's been really beneficial from that perspective as well. So there's a question in the chat, what are Open Source Friday sprints? So we have a problem that many open source projects have, in that we have a very large backlog of bug fixes and features that need to be reviewed and tested and merged into a release. We've got something like 224, I think it was, I was checking this morning. And it takes 2 people to test them and someone to do, one of those 2 to do a code review for every one of those. So it's just hard work when you're getting loads coming in all the time to keep going through them. So what we decided to do, we had actually all of our partners and one other who's not a partner decided that we would all commit to Fridays being Open Source Friday sprints. So Open Source Friday is a thing. If you just search for Open Source Friday in your favorite search engine, you can sign up with your GitHub account. And basically what we're doing in our community is saying every Friday, we're trialing this with our product team. And if it works well, which it is with our product team, we're hoping to open it out to all of the teams in our community. So we have product, community, education, and marketing. They're the 4 main teams in our project. We also have legal and finance, but nobody really cares about that. So mainly that one sort of sits in the shadows and is basically me. And what we're doing in the product team is every Friday, those agencies have committed to allowing their staff to have a block of time that they are ring fencing for open source contribution. So that they will only be working on open source contributions at that time on a Friday. Because we're in an international community, that means we have some people starting really, really early EU time. We have some people starting really, really late in the evening EU time. So we do have people most of the time. And we're focusing on the things we want to get into the next few releases. or things that we really need to get fixed. Like if we've had a bug that's come up from a regression, we'll ask one of their team to work on that. And because they have dedicated time from their employer to work on it in their working hours, it works really well for everyone. So we get stuff through much quicker. People are excited and inspired because there's people around to work with and to help them and collaborate. And it's also much easier for us to onboard new contributors because we know that at some point on that Friday, there'll be a bunch of people around who can help new people if they need help with something. So that's our Open Source Friday sprints. It's pretty open at the moment. You know, people can join in at any time and get involved. So yeah, so that has all like worked really well. It's worked really well in our favor, and it's we're moving forwards with the partners program. Some of the things we did learn: transparency really matters. So it's really important to have clear policies and workflows which covers the whole process. What do you need to do in order to become a partner? How does that process happen? Like, you fill in the form, who reviews it, what's the criteria, blah blah blah. And also whatever the process is for ongoing, like reviewing every quarter and giving warnings if they're dropping down in their activity. It's also really important to be clear on the expectations of promotion. So we only have finite resources. We can't do all singing, all dancing campaigns to promote our partners every month. We just don't have the resources at this time to do that. So it's really important to set those expectations of, we'll do a big blast when you join on, we'll put you in the newsletter every month, and whatever else it is that you're planning to do, so that they understand what they're getting in return and you're clear about their expectations of you. And also setting really clear content guidelines for their listing pages, what they can and can't put on there, how many links can they have, because you don't want those pages to be an epic spam fest. They need to be useful for your community members. So we actually don't allow them to edit their own pages. They have to provide the copy to us. We review it, copy edit as needed, and then we change the content. And we've been very clear with them, saying you're allowed one link in the intro section and that's it, no more links anywhere else. So yeah, being really clear on that is also really important. It avoids difficult conversations if they want to SEO the heck out of their content and it just looks really unhelpful. So just to come to an end now, I'm going to talk about what I think we would do differently, or things that I really want to change in this process. This is a really manual process at the moment. It's something that I set up really quickly as an MVP, basically, to get it up and running and see if it worked and see if it was valuable. But as a result of that, I have to manually update all of those images and change people's names and jiggle them around on the page. It doesn't take a massive amount of time, but it would be nice if that was all automated and pulled automatically through from Savannah using their API, but we're not there yet. So that's one of the things, like, it has taken a bit of time to actually run those reports and get the information and then do all of the jiggling about and updating. And we've also had feedback from the community saying they want to be able to find, like, the companies that speak their language, or that are in their location, or that offer the particular services they're needing. Whereas at the moment, everything is kind of flat HTML. It's not in a database. So we can't really do that at this time. So that will probably be like a version 2 of our partners portal. But as we scale, that's going to become more of a problem as we get more people involved. And the companies are going to want to make sure that they're optimizing for this as well. So it's something that we probably would have done differently if we had the time and resources, but we didn't. Also, currently, there's not really any way for me to know if partners are declining in their activity. Like, I get alerts for individuals, but I don't get any kind of alerts for companies. And I sort of have a sense of this when I'm updating their pages with their quarterly activities. But it would be really nice to just get a notification if a company is starting to decline in their activity. So seeing as Savannah as an open source project, it's something I'm going to raise as a feature request for Michael, who's the maintainer, to see if there's some way we can get a rolled up report to tell us if the partners are declining activity. We're also thinking about having a tiered program. So if you're thinking about this kind of project in an open source project, I really recommend you start it really simple. But we are thinking about, do we have a tiered program so that if people are contributing more, or they're more active, or there's kind of like they want to pay more to being higher up, or they want to contribute more to get higher up, do we actually create a tiered program? And there are pluses and minuses for this kind of thing. At the moment, we sort of feel like it would add too much complexity, and we just don't have the overhead to manage this. But lots of other programs in open source projects do have the ability to move up through tiers, and there's more kudos with the higher tiers. So yeah, it's something that's sort of on the back burner that we might consider in the next couple of years. But for the time being, we've just been like, we don't really have the resources to make that happen. And we're also thinking about having sponsored content, so enabling our partners to write content for our blogs, which is helpful for our community members. So not just, like I was saying earlier, not just a spam fest, but actually something that brings value, but making it very clear that it's a sponsored content. So it might be talking about specifically what they do with their platforms or tools or whatever. We want to add this kind of idea, firstly, because it adds more value to the company. It adds more content to our blog, so it's more helpful for users and what have you. And also just as a nice thing to do to get them involved in the community in a different way and giving back in a different way. So I think that's all I have to say about our partners program. I am around if you have any questions. If you prefer to email me, you can email me directly, which is absolutely fine, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever works for you. And as I say, I will upload these onto my notice page, and you can have a look at the resources and stuff there as well. So any questions? I think we had a couple of questions come through on the chat, but is there anything folks would like to know?
Thank you so much, Ruth. That was awesome. Saying Ruth sounds very lovely, saying my name out loud. But yeah, it was a very insightful session. And I think I have a question. So my question is, I don't know if this was mentioned in when you were talking, but I am a strong, like, I believe that, incentive programs in open source, helps, brings in more contributors. So is there data that you folks analyzed and noticed that after starting like the incentive program, you got more contributors? Have you gotten feedback about like how the incentive program is going and how it brings in more contributors? So I want to like know more about that.
Yeah, I think the main thing that we've heard from partners is that it's great to actually be featured on the partners page, because that's where anytime anyone asks for help with things in Mautic, we basically say, go and speak to one of our partners anytime. What used to happen is I used to be like, well, there's this company and there's this company and there's that company. Whereas now I can be like, these are the companies you should go and talk to. So it reduces the bias in a way, just sending them to our partners. I think that they are also starting to see the benefits of being more active, because their reputation is growing by being more active in the community, and people know who they are. So they're more likely to work with people who they know and who they've seen in the community than people who they don't know. So that's also good. But we're not only looking at like that kind of incentivizing, we're also looking at ways we can compensate individuals, for example. So we're trialing a contributor in our community who we're paying 10 hours a week to work on things that are important to our community, and other ways that we're trying to make things just a bit more sustainable for individuals, but also promoting companies as well.